Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today here on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. In this episode, we'll be talking track and field with a very special guest who is a member of the Navy men's cross country and track teams. He'll be giving us his perspective on race strategy, coaching, and running at the master's level. And he'll also throw in a physics lesson while he's at it. This is commissioning week at the Naval Academy, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. All right, we are all set for episode 32, and whether you are a regular listener or hearing us for the first time, thanks for making us part of your day. As I mentioned earlier, it is commissioning week in Annapolis. Things got started this past Friday, and the first big event was the ring dance for the class of 2023 on Saturday. The class of 2025 climbed Herndon on Monday morning. If I can find the time it took for them to climb it, I'll let you know before I wrap things up. I know the class of 84 got to the top and swapped out the covers in an hour and 27 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Now, that wasn't the fastest time, but it is my understanding that it was better than average. But of course, this is all about the senior class of 2022. They will be commissioned as officers in the Navy or Marine Corps on Friday the 27th. The one thing I'm holding my breath on is the weather. It doesn't look all that great according to the forecast, so I'm hoping something changes. Right now, there's a 50% chance of rain on Friday. Actually, the cloud cover wouldn't be so bad as long as there's no rain to go along with it while the ceremony is happening. It'd also be nice to have the Blue Angels perform on Thursday and do their flyover on Friday. So we'll see what happens weather-wise. Anyway, with all this going on, there isn't much to report in the way of a sports update. The intercollegiate sailing team is in the middle of 3 national championship competitions. They finished 6th in the team race category in a field of 16, and they also finished 6th in the fleet race category, this time out of a field of 18 teams. As I've mentioned before, this is a co-ed sport, but they do have a women's division, and the mids will be having a team compete for that national championship this week, and it will finish up on Wednesday. Finally, the men's heavyweight and lightweight rowing teams competed at the Eastern Sprints just over a week ago. The heavyweight sent 6 boats. 3 made it to their respective finals, with the number 6 Varsity 8 boat coming away with the win. The other boats fought hard, but in the end, the team overall finished in 11th place. The lightweight team entered 5 crews and finished in a 3-way tie for first place. Their number 4 and number 5 boats won their respective final races, while the number 1 Varsity 8 and number 2 Varsity 8 boats just barely got edged out, and they finished second. The hardware at stake in the Eastern Sprints for the lightweights was the Job Cup. The mids finished tied for first with 32 points, along with Yale and Columbia, and the tiebreaker wound up going to Yale as a result of their win in the 1v8 race. So they were declared the winner, and they only beat the mids by a second, so it was really, really close. But it was definitely a strong result despite the 2 close runner-up finishes, and Coach Sean Bagnall is feeling pretty good about where his guys are as he gets them ready for the IRA National Championships in a couple of weeks. Those will be in West Windsor, New Jersey. And finally, I will leave you guys with the final count on the number of Patriot League championships the mids won this year. They ended up with 9, which is a new record. The titles came in men's and women's cross country, men's and women's indoor and outdoor track, men's and women's swimming and diving, and also men's tennis. So again, just one more record during a sports season where the mids set a whole bunch of them. All right, we're going to go ahead and step away for a quick break and be right back with our deep dive segment, so don't go anywhere. It is time for our deep dive segment, and we'll be talking a little bit about track and field in recognition of the Patriot League championships that the men and the women took home a couple weeks ago. And we have a very special guest to help us do that. He is a former member of the Navy men's cross country and track teams. He still runs competitively, having racked up some big wins within his age group in some major races. And today he is the director of channel sales at Constellation Energy, which is headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland. So, would you please welcome my fellow classmate and member of the 18th Company, Ed Wilson, to Navy Sports Central. All right, Ed, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. We really appreciate you being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Carl. Always enjoy spending time with you.
All right, thanks a lot. And same goes for me too, by the way. I'm going to go ahead and start things off by asking you the same questions I do with all our guests who went to the academy. So here we go. You grew up in Maryland, and no doubt you're very familiar with the academy, but I'm kind of curious as to, what made you decide to want to go there, and what was your motivation for applying for an appointment?
Yeah, I did grow up in Maryland, in Baltimore County, Timonium to be precise. And I was the sixth of seven children in our family. And my dad was not what we would say a hugely successful businessman. So money for college was not a whole lot of it. And, I was got good test scores in high school and stuff, and I wanted to go to a good school. And, what was the best school I could go to that I could afford? Well, Navy, you didn't have to pay a lot in cash. You just pay for it with years of service. And so that was a motivating factor for sure. I wanted to go to a quality school. But also, to be honest, I was always a bit of a history buff as a kid. I liked the appeal of the Navy, naval heritage. I liked the leadership aspect of it. I was your typical Naval Academy applicant with student body president, varsity athlete, all that kind of good stuff. Right. So the academy appealed to me from the leadership perspective and the fact that it was the best school I could afford to go to. So sign me up. I was in.
Yeah. So in high school, you competed in both cross country and track. Am I correct there?
I did. I did cross country and track. Of the two, I have to say I liked cross country better. My leg speed is not as good as some people. So the longer the distance, the more competitive I was. And cross country was 3 miles or 5K in high school. And in track, the longest distance was 2 miles. I did well in both, but I really enjoyed cross country. More of a team aspect to the sport. Yeah. Now track is a team competition, but it is a compilation of a bunch of individual events. Whereas in cross country, everybody runs the same course at the same time, and the scoring is very clearly a team scoring. It's top 5 guys score, top 7 displace. You're all doing the same thing, so the sense of camaraderie and common effort is much more pronounced.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I had a conversation with our classmate Ginger Rice back in the fall about that. And that was really my first education into really understanding how the event was scored. I knew that when I looked at the result, I knew that, okay, lowest score wins when you see the team, the dual event result. But I didn't know how they came about, those numbers. So that really helped me out.
I'll toss in a story here that I had the pleasure my last tour of duty in the Navy, actually coaching a local high school team. And to this day, the head coach and I was like the assistant. We still remember that we ran the state championships. This is in Maryland. There was a Centennial High School in Howard County, Maryland. We were at the state championships, and we had the runners that came in first, second, and fourth. And for people who know how cross-country scoring goes, you add up the top 5 places on your team, and the lowest score wins, like golf. But you have to add up places. So we had first, second, and fourth. So really low scores for your first 3 guys out of 5. And you're talking a state meet where there's over 100 runners, and you're like, man, with only 3 guys, you're just at 7. That's awesome. Well, the 4th and 5th guy, we just couldn't get them to kick into the program, and we had him coming in second. And,
bummer.
30 years later, Al Dodds and I still, whenever we see each other, we grumble that we didn't win that state meet because the 4th and 5th guy, we couldn't get them to get into the program and perform that day. So, wow,
that's something. Ed, you mentioned coaching just a second ago. So talk to me a little bit about how you've managed to stay close to running since graduation.
It's a lifetime thing. Unlike many sports that people play in high school and college, it's tough to play football when you're older. I have a son-in-law who played lacrosse in college, and he's tried to join an old man league, but the bruises start to add up. But running is a sport that is a lifetime sport. Like all of our classmates, we graduated and we had service obligations. I went submarines. So didn't do a whole lot of running on patrol in the North Pacific. And I got married fairly early, had kids fairly early. So other than my last tour of duty when I was working at Fort Meade, and the Air Force colonel I reported to allowed me to go coach. He thought it'd be a great recruiting opportunity. I thought, well, if he's deluded into thinking that's why I'm doing it, so be it. But the irony is I actually did recruit a kid off the wrestling team who ended up going to the Naval Academy. So he got the last laugh. But I did that for a year and a half, my last tour of duty, before I got out. But then I had kids. I had to get a real job. I kept running over the years. And then I started to get back into it as my kids got older and more independent, got their driver's licenses. And I started, joined a local club team, a racing team associated with a local running club, and trained with those guys. We have some good people on that running team. We have, I think, we had 3 women run the Olympic trials in the marathon from our club team. So very competitive. And of course, of my 4 daughters, 3 of them ran cross country at one time or another during high school. Right. So I've been to a lot of cross country meets, either as an athlete, a coach, or a parent, and I love it. Just love it.
Very cool. All right, so now we're going to jump into a few questions around the Naval Academy track team. I mean, we're basically, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks removed from both the men and the women sweeping the Patriot League championships. And my God, that's like, it's becoming a routine now, because I believe for the men, it was like their 8th straight, and for the women, it was like their 3rd. But one of the things I've noticed over the last couple of years is that both teams are very deep when it comes to the middle to long distance. And as a matter of fact, I was looking at some of the men's results at the most recent championships, and in the 800 meters, they won 13 out of a possible 39 points. In the 5,000, they won 16 points. In the 10,000, it was 21 points. And then if you even go look at the 3,000 meter steeplechase, it was 24 points. So they do a good job of being able to, pack those positions that earn points for you. And I wanted to ask you, and you can draw on your experience as both a runner and a coach here. Is this something that's kind of like a straight talent thing, or is there a particular racing strategy that you can develop that will allow you to perform at this level and earn those points in a way, even if there's a couple of runners on the other team that might have better times overall for a given distance?
Yeah, I'm going to say every sport has a proportionality of talent, preparation, and tactics or strategy. And I'm going to say that proportionality differs from sport to sport. Let's face it, Tom Brady is over 40 and he's still operating at a Pro Bowl level, because in football, the strategy, tactics, and intelligence are a much bigger part of it. Not that I'm not saying football players aren't in shape and they don't have to be strong on stuff, but you look at distance events and you certainly have to have talent, but training, conditioning, and preparation is such a huge part of it. You can't fake your way through a marathon. You can't fake your way through a 10,000 meter. Now, I'm not going to say that you can fake your way through a 100-meter dash, but if some guy has raw talent, he can probably get further competitively in a 100-meter dash than the guy with raw talent in the 10,000 meters. So again, it's proportionality, not that there's none of one or the other, but the proportionality shifts. So when you get to those distance events, the training, the conditioning, the type of workouts that the coaching staff put the athletes through makes a big difference. And again, not that there's no tactics. The tactics in a 100-meter dash are going to be much smaller than the tactics in a 10,000 meter or a 1,500 meter. I mean, you look at Matt Centrowicz in the 2016 games at Rio. I mean, it was one of the slowest 1,500 meters ever, and he won a gold medal. It was all tactics. Not that those guys aren't incredibly shape, but the time was very pedestrian. So in the 10,000 meters, tactics are important, but you got to have the conditioning, you got to have the training to be there, to be ready to execute those tactics when you do it. And that can vary from runner to runner. Some runners run really well from the front. Some run better just staying off the pace, and they got a strong finishing kick. So, good coaching staff prepares those runners and then also knows their strengths, so that one runner, go out strong and try and tire the competition. Another runner might be stay with this guy and then take him at the end.
All right. And just kind of sticking along those lines, one of the stars for the men's team was Miguel Mathias. He won both the 10,000 meters and the 5,000 meters. They were run on consecutive days, and I believe the 10,000 was the very first race run on Friday, and then the 5,000 was the last individual race on Saturday. But the one thing that was constant in both races was just the lousy weather. I mean, it was pouring down rain pretty much the whole time. So what I wanted to touch base with you on is when you're dealing with something like that, and I mean, there's just like no let up. All right. First of all, how challenging is it to run in those conditions? And secondly, what do you have to kind of program into your brain that you got to deal with that you wouldn't have to worry about on a nice day?
Now, I'll say for a track meet, the distance runners are probably the least affected by the weather.
Okay.
The other events, I mean, any of the jumping events, pole vault, high jump, even triple jump, things like that require, one little slip affects performance. They're more significantly affected. I would say there's an inverse relationship between the distance of the event and the conditions, how much they affect. Sprinters, or I should say temperature. So like sprinters want it to be warm. They want it to be loose. They want it to be warm. Distance runners, like you get to a marathon, perfect temperature for the marathon is in the upper 40s. I have a guy who used to be on my team here at work. He's a 200-meter guy. And he jokes, he's like, oh my God, nobody wants to run in 48 degrees. And I'm like, that's perfect. He'd rather it be like 80 degrees out. And, so he's nice and loose. So the weather affects different events differently. And in a track meet, you got all kinds of different events. So, temperature, again, shorter the distance, the warmer you want it to be temperature wise. Longer the distance, the cooler you want it to be. Rain, again, it's going to affect distance, affect those events that, pole vault, high jump, things that you could slip a little bit, not going to affect the distance events as much. In fact, if depending on the temperature, a little bit of rain actually can be really nice for a distance runner, like a 5K or 10K race. Wind is probably the bigger factor.
Got it.
Certainly sprint events, if you're going into the wind or the wind at your back, that makes a big difference on times. On the distance events, people might think, oh, well, you're running in a circle, so the wind helps you on the back stretch and it hurts you on the home stretch. Doesn't it all cancel out? Well, those who pay attention in physics class know that the force is proportional to velocity squared. So
right.
The differential velocity of you running with the wind versus you running against the wind is not the same. So a windy day on a track is going to have an impact on all events, even the distance events that go in a circle. That being said, distance guys can tuck in behind each other, which you can't do that in a sprint. So that's the thing. And that can affect tactics and strategy a little bit. If you're going to make your move on the last lap of a 5K or 10K, and the wind's coming in your face and you've been tucked behind somebody and you're planning on popping out to that second lane and making a move, and all of a sudden you pop out and the wind's in your face. Oh, that's not good. Similarly, if you normally run from the front and there's a wind the whole time, you pay the cost of running into the wind, but you don't get the benefit of the wind pushing you from behind, because people are behind you. So it can have a factor. I go back to a quote I've heard. I can't remember who said it. I think they were talking about the Boston Marathon, and they said that you have to keep in mind it's a race, not a time trial. Meaning that bad conditions are going to affect times. But at the end of the day, you're not there to run a time. You're there to beat the guy in the lane next to you.
Got it. Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's what you got to do.
All right. Nice. So when I look at the results that both track teams have recorded over the last couple of years, the one thing that sticks out to me is how successful Jamie Cook, who's the director of track and field and cross country at the Academy, how successful he's been in the 7 years he's been there. His record has included multiple sweeps of Army, and like I'd mentioned before, just running the table on cross country, indoor and outdoor track at the Patriot League Championship. So last year when they won, and granted it was kind of like a COVID year and stuff like that, but he was interviewed and he made a particular point of saying that it's been great to see how much the athletes have bought into the training and the culture. And he didn't really expand on that too much during the course of that interview or press conference. So I went ahead and I reached out to Chris Whitehead, who's the guy in sports information that covers track and field. And I just said, hey, Coach Cook had an interesting comment that he made after the championships were over. But I was wondering if you can kind of explain a little bit about how they train and what kind of culture he was talking about specifically. And Chris said, in terms of the practices, he does a lot of things that are kind of cool. And maybe you've done them before as well, but I wanted to get your take on it. He would do things that kind of promote competition, which I think is nothing new to anybody in the terms of a practice environment. But things like stacking athletes against each other whose talent levels might be different. So he'll stagger the starts in terms of the distances where somebody starts so that it encourages like photo finishes and so forth. So maybe somebody who doesn't quite have the speed over a certain distance, he'll start them at 20 and 30 meters ahead of time, ahead of the other guy. And then they just have to go to the finish line and see what the result was. Things like that. And he would schedule dual meets against some pretty good competition where they wouldn't even keep score. They would just say, hey, just focus on what you're doing, focus on your result. Don't even worry about what the place is or anything like that. So that all kind of worked together to create a pretty positive culture when it came to the competitive side of it, right? So I'm wondering, during the times that you were coaching the high school teams and so forth, what were some of the things that you did to kind of help try to get the same result in terms of establishing that positive culture, but yet maintaining that competition at a high level?
Yeah, I've heard good things about Jamie Cook. I've heard he's very metrics oriented, which, obviously is very good. I had the experience of Coach Cantello, the legendary or infamous Al Cantello. Some of my former teammates and I have different perceptions of our experience during that time. But, the kinds of things that you're describing that Coach Cook is doing, they make a lot of sense. And you certainly, one of the things I love about distance running and cross country is that another coach once said to me, or we talked about this, and he was a very successful high school coach, and we talked about the reasons why kids should run high school cross country, and one of the things that we talked about was that one of the joys of cross country, especially like in high school, is that my success doesn't diminish your success, and vice versa, and runners being mutually supportive of each other is a very positive thing. But also at the same time, there's sort of a friendly internal competition, which is a healthy thing, that, pushing each other. And I have a friend on my current racing team with our club, and I joke with him because he's, about my age, is maybe a year younger. We're kind of about the same, ability level, and we do workouts together and pushing each other in the workouts. And I always joke because I'll say, hey, I know where you are, and my last race was slightly better than your last race. And he laughs. He goes, we're teammates. And I go, yeah, but we push each other, and that's what makes us better. Right. So, those kinds of things that if you set up that sort of friendly internal competition, that can be a very positive thing. You don't want it to become destructive. You don't want it to become political, because that's one of the joys I always thought about running was there was no politics. There's no playing time that, the coach played you more than me, or, you didn't pass to me. If you can keep it positive and, your success doesn't diminish mine, but you being a little bit better than me helps lift me, that's a very positive thing. And there's other aspects that, I remember some of my fond memories running in Navy were, the camaraderie of the team. And it was very much a team-oriented perspective. Two funny stories. One was the cross-country team used to go up to Catoctin State Park near Camp David Labor Day weekend before the season started. And I remember a second class year, Willie McCool was the team captain, and we went up to do a long running weekend. And this is back in the day before GPS watches. And so we went on this long run in the woods, and we got lost. We came out on some road, and Willie was trying to pretend like he knew what we was doing. But I'm convinced we were lost. And some pickup truck came by, and somebody finally had to ask the guy, hey, how do you get back to the camp area? And the guy looks at us like, you boys are crazy. You're a lot of miles away from this camp area. And I'm like, well, yeah, we know, we ran here. And he's like, what? And well, if you head back this direction, it's in that direction. I swear to God, we must have run a marathon that day. But nobody knows because we had no GPS watches and back in that. And then, but that was, kind of a bonding experience. We all got lost in the woods together, and we talked about it and dead tired and probably drank some beer that night. And, the other one was plebe beer. I'm going to throw, I think, George Apatani and Mike Kors under the bus. I was a plebe, and of course, you weren't allowed to go out in town. But so I guess it must have been indoor track. It was cold. And so we ran out on West Street, and we stuck some cash in our pockets, in our shorts, and we stopped at Wendy's to get some chili on West Street, which was a big no-no for a plebe. And so, we had wolfed down some chili, and it was time to, we got to get back. We told Cantella we were running 10 miles, and we only did like 6 because we stopped for chili. And so we went, and, okay, we got to go in. And so we had to run across West Street to get to the other side. So we were going to run back. And of course, I've been sitting for how long? 15, 20 minutes eating chili. And I tightened up. And as I went to sprint across West Street, I pulled my hamstring. And I was like, oh, damn. If Cantella finds out that I pulled my hamstring stopping for chili on West Street, he's going to hate me even more. So I limped through a few practices after that, and it didn't matter. Plebe year, I was on the scrub squad anyway. But that was the price of camaraderie with my teammates was a pulled hamstring that day.
Right. That's pretty good. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question around Matthias's 2 wins at the the 10K and the 5K. So you're pretty familiar with these distances, but here's what I'm trying to figure out. I do recreation running, as you know. We've actually run together a few years back, and that's the last time I'll ever do that, Ed, by the way. but when I think about running those distances over a course, I don't have any problem seeing how I could stay engaged, right? Because the scenery is always changing and that sort of thing. Now, on a track, obviously, 5K, you're running basically 12 and a half laps. 10K, you're running 25, and it's just around and in circles. So my question is, this whole idea of just staying in the moment, I mean, is this something that's just built into distance runners? Is it as simple as just hearing their split times every lap, or are there other things they can do to keep themselves focused? I don't know. I'm just asking because I have no idea.
Yeah, it's funny you ask that. My wife, who's gotten into running the last couple of years, so she signed up for one of these tips of the day, and it comes in her email box, and it was a tip from Hal Higdon, famous running coach, and it talked about staying focused during a run. And she reached this off to me, and she goes, "Oh, this is so much BS. Aren't you supposed to just let your mind wander and get swept up in the run?" And I said, "Not if you're competitive. No." And she gave me that look like, oh, you're being a jerk. I said, no, read what he said. And it was like for competitive runners, if you want to run, competitively or good time stuff. But it's true. You do need to stay focused. And depending upon the race, it can be different things. It can be you're focusing on tactical things. You're focused on a certain runner that your competition really well, and you want to maintain a certain distance behind this person, or keep them, so many places, or maybe just, hey, I want to be in the lead through such and such. And but more often than not, you have a very specific idea of what splits you're going to hit, and from the very first lap, what times you're supposed to hit, and you're constantly mentally recalculating, am I ahead, am I behind? And you can have races where you're going through it and the splits take you so far, and then after that point, then it just turns into a foot race.
Right.
But you've planned that out in advance that, I'm going to hit this split in this time, this split in this time. And then at this point, I'm going to see where I am relative to my competition. And from then it's a foot race, and my tactics is going to be go to the front wherever the front is, or go to second place wherever second place is. But no, competitive runners don't just show up and like, okay, I'm going to run how I feel today and see what kind of time I get and see what that gets me.
Right,
no, there's going to be a very specific plan there. And you can practice that. My brother was a very good marathoner when he was young. He ran the trials in '84, and he gave me a workout on the track, which was 800-meter repeats with a 400-meter recovery, which is pretty standard. But what he always beat into me was those 400 meters have to be in a certain time. A recovery lap, but he's like, don't do the 800 meters fast and then just bend over when you cross the line and catch your breath and then start walking and jogging. He's like, no, you do the 800 meters in a specified time. And then your recovery lap, it's also in a specified time. It's slower. It's at a different pace, but part of the workout was to teach you to recover while you were still running. But the other part of the workout was keep yourself mentally focused. You don't ever stop and relax. You just, the entire workout, you're mentally focused, and you have every part of the workout, you have a specific goal to accomplish, and you get done. And by the time you're done, you've done 10 miles or whatever. But the entire time you've been focused on hit this time, hit this time, hit this time, hit this time, and then you get done. And it trains you to stay mentally focused on the entire thing. And I have friends that I run with that are very good runners, and they'll confess they have a hard time staying focused during a long race. They're better at short races, because the long races, their mind starts to wander. And I've been in some of my better marathons where, it's mile 10 or mile 11, and it's easy to kind of go, hey, I'm feeling good today. But and you check your watch and go, I'm off pace. Get back. And you have to do it.
Right.
If you're running competitively. And if you're just running for a fun run, enjoy the birds and the bees and all that kind of good stuff. But my wife used to tease me because I do the Cherry Blossom 10 miler in DC. And a number of years I'd come home and she'd say, how are the cherry blossoms? And I'd say, I didn't see them. She's like, what are you talking about? And I go, I was focused on the race. I didn't see the cherry blossoms.
All right. Hey, Ed, that's some great perspective. So thanks a lot for sharing that with us. I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Ed Wilson and find out a little bit about what he's doing these days. So stick with us. Welcome back to Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and I'm joined by former Navy cross country and track team member Ed Wilson, and he's been giving us his take on the Navy outdoor track team that just won the Patriot League Championship. So, Ed, before I continue, I'd like to give you a chance to get us caught up on what's been going on with you lately, both professionally and personally. So go ahead, the mic is yours.
Oh, great. So professionally, I have been, 30 years with Constellation, which is an energy company headquartered out of Baltimore. And it's been really interesting. I was a Navy nuke sub guy, USS Florida out of Bangor, Washington. So, and then my last tour was an intel job at Fort Meade. So when I got out, it's like, okay, do I want to go work in the intelligence community or do I want to go work in the nuclear power community? Don't ask me why. I took the nuclear power route. Started at a nuclear power plant, and by the way, one of my firsties worked at that plant, and he and I married sisters. So I'm the brother-in-law of one of my firsties from a company. It's a weird thing. I can tell stories about that, but another podcast. But I did that, and I realized I hated nuclear power. No offense to my fellow nukes out there. I think nuclear power is wonderful. It's safe. We need it. I just personally would let someone else make it. So I got into the business side of the energy business, got my MBA, and actually sell electricity and natural gas to commercial industrial customers in the 13 states that have competitive choice for power, and there's other states that you can buy natural gas. And so I actually run our association's channel, so trade associations that endorse Constellation as an energy provider. My team works with them. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing that. It's very timely topic. It used to be a boring subject. But these days, with people reading the newspapers, what's happened with the war in Ukraine, price of energy is, just climbing. The issue of energy security is a big topic, tied in with national security and geopolitics. So yeah, it's a very, very topical industry to be in right now.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked a little bit about this offline when we were getting this conversation set up. But I'm kind of curious in terms of, what you're doing now. What do you think the best innovation has been in your industry that's kind of helped big companies see the light when it comes to being more energy efficient?
Good question. I would actually pivot and say the big, most important thing right now in the energy industry is not just efficiency, but decarbonization.
Okay.
Climate change, people may have different perspectives on how serious that is, but it's becoming, I would say, intuitively obvious that That's a challenge that we face and we have to do something about. So decarbonization is probably the most important thing in our industry. Not to the, and I'll couple that with doing that in an economical manner that, how can we have affordable energy and clean energy at the same time? And how do we transition to a future that's, decarbonized, but at the same time, economically strong for the country and for the world economy? So that's a big thing. Part of that is energy efficiency. Because certainly the megawatt hour that you don't use is the most efficient one, and there's no carbon associated with reduction in energy usage. But there's other aspects to it. There's renewable energy, nuclear power. As much as I hated making it, I enjoy selling it, and that is the biggest source of non-carbon power in the U.S. And then there's other things like carbon offsets. There's actually renewable natural gas. That you take landfill gas, and rather than that methane get in the atmosphere, you can take that landfill gas and burn it. And there's carbon capture. There's lots of things, but that's probably for the next 20 years. That's the thing that the energy industry is I think taking the lead on.
Okay, all right, very good. Now, in addition to that, is there any one practice that you would like to see these big companies incorporate more that they aren't doing right now? I mean, probably on some level, especially with your customers, decarbonization is one phase. What else could they be doing that they need to be doing more of?
I would say that, and this may be a slightly different answer to the question you asked, is, I still can't get the engineer out of me, even though I was a political science major at Navy. But nuclear power school and prototype beat into me enough engineering. Is that, if you're trying to solve a problem like climate change and decarbonization, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And I personally get frustrated that, for example, natural gas is way cleaner than coal. And the vast majority of carbon reduction in the United States in the last 10 years has not been because we built more solar farm and wind farms. Not that that's not good, but it's been the shuttering of coal plants in favor of natural gas plants, because natural gas plants burn generate half as much carbon emissions as coal plants. So if you're trying to solve the problem and you try to get as much carbon out of the atmosphere as fast as you can, you don't go for the small solution that's perfect when you have this, moderate solution, which is huge, that can lead you to more and more of the small solution that's perfect. So if I had a chance to, speak to people, it's like, please get away from the extremes. Please get away from the, there's no such thing as climate change. And please get away from, we don't want a natural gas molecule anywhere because everything has to be wind and solar. And clearly you're not an engineer, because there's the issue of, trying to provide, keep the lights on when it's dark out and the wind's not blowing. So how do you do that? And battery storage is too expensive. And of course, batteries themselves require a lot of chemicals and rare earth metals and all that kind of stuff. So, let's solve this and get from A to B. Well, there's a point in between where natural gas, has a really strong role. Not that I'm being paid by the natural gas industry, but that's just an example of, there's a lot of things that we say we all agree on where we want to get to, but the way people act sometimes, it sounds like they'd rather fight about the way to get there than the fact that we all want to try and get to the same place.
Right.
And I think that applies to, climate change, energy issues, and there's a lot of other societal issues that I think that, we say we all want to get to the same place, but the way we fight over the process, I get a little skeptical that people really have their heart in trying to solve the problem. So
right, understood. All right, good stuff. So now we're going to have a little bit of fun, and we're actually going to stick with what you've been doing, at least in some capacity at Constellation. You are no stranger to these types of productions when it comes to doing podcasts and so forth. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your experience with Constellation in terms of what you do along those lines.
My agent got to you. So about 3 years ago, before the pandemic, I was at a national sales conference. I think you probably have been to some of those in your day.
Mm-hmm.
And leadership sitting around like, how can we engage the employees more? We have so many people because we're a big company. We're a national company. How do we keep the employees engaged and keep morale up and stuff like that? And one of my colleagues and I said, hey, we'll take that challenge. And we brainstormed. He's like, what if we put on like an internal TV show? And we made it fun and like sort of a guerrilla type employee show that wasn't corporate communications, didn't have all the fancy gloss and carefully parsed phrases. And so we ended up producing now it's bi-monthly broadcast that's it's a little bit Today Show, a little bit Saturday Night Live, a little bit of I don't know, McNeil NewsHour, and we interview people. We do some funny video clips and stuff like that. So that's become sort of an extracurricular activity for me at work. And my family mocks me for it. We did a show actually at Broadcast Today. But the one before that was in March. And so we did a St. Patrick's Day theme, and we were still working remote. We just went back in the building this month. And so I literally set up a green room in one of my spare bedrooms because kids have all moved out. They've all got married or gone to college and graduated. But one of my daughters was home. And so I set up this green room. I bought some green felt at Joann Fabrics. I set up this green room and I dressed up as a leprechaun so that our video crew could superimpose me on the desk of my co-host who works out of Wisconsin. And one of my daughters came in and took pictures of me dressed in this leprechaun outfit. And she, of course, texted it to the rest of the family. And they had great fun at my expense. But the show gets, it does what it's intended to do. It's intended to be fun, informative. We interviewed the CEO for today's program. And so a lot of good time today. So yeah, I can relate to what you do, Carl. It's a lot of work. People don't realize it, but it's I can appreciate it.
Right. Okay, now we're going to bounce over to running. You recently completed another Boston Marathon, I guess about a month ago, and I'm trying to get a sense for how many you've run over the years, and we can kind of go into some detail a little bit later, but how many have you done so far?
So this year would have been the 12th on the course, 13 if you count the virtual one in 2020. And a shout out to my former teammate and classmate, Sean Roski. Very first year I qualified back in 09. I emailed him, looked him up, emailed him, said, hey, Sean, I'm running the Boston Marathon. Maybe we can grab a beer together. And he responded like, you're running the marathon. I do it every year. So every year since then, Sean and I, we connect and I've spent many Boston Marathon nights before the race at his house and we our wives would become friends. He came to my daughter's wedding, and so it's been sort of an annual mini vacation for us to go out to Boston and see the Roskis and run the marathon.
Oh, very good. Yeah. So
awesome.
Now I've always been curious about the course because, a lot of times if I think about it on Patriots Day, I'll find some station that's carrying out. ESPN normally kind of has some coverage or whatever. And I've seen the course in different places, but normally by the time I turn it on, being here on the West Coast, or close to the West Coast anyway, I'm coming in at about like mile 22 or something like that. So most of the race is over. But I wanted to get your take on, in terms of the course itself, compared to others that you've run. Clearly you have the fact that, Boston is probably one of the most famous venues in the world when it comes to marathons. But in terms of degree of difficulty, what can you say about that?
I personally think it's a very difficult course, very tactical. It's a net downhill course. The operative word is net. So the first, it's kind of pretty downhill the first couple miles, and it's kind of, semi-flat, semi-rolling. And then there's a big downhill at mile 15. And then at mile 16, you hit the Newton Hills, which are a series of 4 hills that peak at Boston College at mile 21. And then it's another significant downhill for about 2 more miles. I guess it's Coolidge Corner, and then you kind of flat for the last 3 or 4. So some people have said, "Oh, well, it can be a fast course because there's so much downhill on it." But those who have run it know that the downhills can be just as dangerous because you can beat up your quads running the downhills. And the placement of the hills, some people say, "Well, the hills aren't that bad," but they're between miles 16 and 21. And that's at the point where you're, you're starting to run out of that glycogen in your muscles and all that kind of stuff. And, if you've gone out a little too hard and you hit those hills, you get to the top at, mile 21. And then guess what? Your gas tank is empty, your quads are shot, and then you're part of the walking wounded, making your way back into Back Bay. So I think it's a very challenging course compared to, say, like Chicago. Chicago is pretty much flat as a pancake. I chuckle because there's one last little overpass you cross when you come back into whatever that park is in Chicago, not Grad Park. But anyway, you come back in the park when it finishes, and there's this little like overpass you have to run up, and they call it Mount Roosevelt because it's like Roosevelt Avenue. And I just want to laugh. I'm like, really? Okay, yeah, granted, it's at mile 25 and a half, but it's like,
yeah,
you compare it to Heartbreak. So Chicago is like, you just basically dial in your pace and just go for 26 miles. New York has its bridges, so some people think that's kind of hilly. And I've run that a couple times, but I'd say Boston's the hardest.
Okay.
Hardest to run well and get a good time on.
All right. So let's stay with that topic. We were talking about bad weather earlier. Okay. What were some of the worst conditions you've ever run in Boston weather-wise?
Two worst conditions. It was 2014, I believe. Temperature almost hit 90 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
And that was, they told everybody, do not try to race, just run to finish. And that was advice that needed to be listened to. And I literally just did that. I just went out and ran. I remember waiting at the start in a short and singlets and just waiting to start. And fortunately, that was when the city of Boston and all the 6 towns lead up to Boston, you run through them. Just amazing people, because everybody was handing you water bottles and cups full of ice. And I think I didn't go more than 200 or 300 yards without somebody handing me something. Because the water stations, which are every mile, would not have been enough.
Right.
So that was amazing. And I'll point out that from race officials, hot days on marathon courses are worse than cold days. It is far easier to heat up someone's body who has hypothermia than it is to cool down someone's body whose internal body temperature has gotten too warm. So in terms of what's more dangerous, the hot days are actually more dangerous. So that was a really bad day. But the most miserable day was 2018, when there were, and I do not exaggerate, there were consistent 20 to 25 mile an hour headwinds. Oh my God. Boston's point to point. So you're essentially running, west, southwest to east, northeast the entire way. And the headwinds were in your face the entire day. It poured, I should say this, it rained nonstop, interrupted only by periods of pure downpour. And I want to say the temperature was like 38, 39, 40 degrees, just bitter cold. It was so cold that during these periods of downpour, my entire chest went numb. And one of my friends that was running that day, if you know runners, they have these little goos that they take with them.
Yeah.
You rip the top of the goo off and you squeeze it in your mouth. One of my friends was trying to get his goo out, and he went to pull the goo out, and the wind blew it away. So it's just like, what? And other people, their hands were so frozen they couldn't rip their goos off. Personally, I tried to tuck behind people because the wind was just so bad, and I would try to get out around somebody to sort of hit my pace and hit my stride, and it was like, that was stupid, and I tucked back behind somebody again. I actually had a good race that day. I didn't have my best time, but I actually placed 12th in my age group. So it goes back to it's a race, not a time trial. So nobody ran good times that day. Well, not many people ran very good times that day, but it was still a race, and they still gave out medals to the top people. And I got a shirt that day actually for being in the top 20 of my age group.
All right,
that was kind of fun. I don't wear it; doesn't fit very well. But I still have the shirt. Now,
just out of curiosity, what has been your overall best time? We talked a little bit about, if you could kind of explain a little bit about the whole, the age grading thing, that'd be kind of cool, because that's still kind of new to me. Most people just kind of focus on what the result is in terms of time, but share that with us, what your best overall time is. And then what you, based on the discussion we had earlier, what your best performance has been.
Yeah, it's a concept I don't know non-runners are familiar with. You know how golf has a handicap, and you get a handicap, and that way people of different abilities can play together and still place bets and all that kind of stuff. So running has, and I guess many other sports, they have an age grade system, and it's a calculator. You can find it online, and it uses the top world-class performances, world records at different ages, and it comes up with a calculator that for your age at a given distance, you plug in your time, and it'll give you an age grade. It's a percentage age grade. And 100% would mean you're the world record holder. Anything in the 90s, it's like international class, and in the 80s is supposed to be national class, and so on and so on. But it's a way that you can compare times over years.
Right.
So I can plug in how I ran at age 59 to compare to how I ran at age 52, because, let's not kid ourselves. You do get slower as you get older.
Right.
And there's different estimates of what that is. But this calculator will help you say, am I running better now relative to my age than I did when I was 52? Or I can even go back and compare to when I was in the academy. And I've done that. I've plugged in like my best cross country time at the academy and spit out an age grade and compare that to, hey, how am I running now that I'm an age group runner in my 50s? So interesting concept, and it kind of helps. It gives you the way to keep competing with yourself over the years. And also I can go to a race and some guy who's 51 and I'm 59 and we run, and I can still say, well, yeah, but you're 8 years younger than me. Well, I can plug in the calculator and say, hey, see, I told you I would run a better race than you did today.
Right.
So it's a nice tool to say that I'm a good race or not. So.
All right. And by the way, for you guys that are listening, Ed's a little bit modest, but I will say that in 2016, he won his age group for the Marine Corps Marathon 10K. And then, Ed, you've also got a win under your belt for the Marine Corps Marathon itself, don't you? What year was that?
Yeah, for my age group, I never didn't win the Open. Age group wins in 2017, 2018.
Okay. All right, so nice tight window there. You got 2016 age group winner for the 10K, and then 2 consecutive years at the marathon. Good stuff. Okay. Hey, by the way, what's your running shoe of choice anyway?
Depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think runners will appreciate. For racing, I've been using the Nike 4%, or actually the Next Percent. It's one of those carbon fiber shoes. I really like it. It doesn't make you faster, but what it does do is make you less tired, meaning that you get to the second half of a marathon and your legs are just a little bit less fatigued, so you don't slow down as much. And many marathoners, it's kind of like Usain Bolt has said that, he really isn't faster in the second half of a race. He just doesn't slow down as much as the other people do. And at the Next Percent, 4%, those carbon shoes, that's the big thing is they don't actually make you faster. They just make you slow down less. So I wear that on race days. I have a pair of Saucony Endorphin Speeds that I'd like to train in. I also have a pair of Hokas that I rotate through. And then I have a pair of Adidas that I use flats that I use for track workouts. So I do have a few pairs of shoes.
And what's the standard number of miles before you're starting to rotate out into a new pair?
About 300 for training shoes. Yeah.
All right. Good deal. Now we talked about race venues before, and Boston being the toughest. Is that your favorite? And even if it is, what's your second favorite venue behind that one?
That's a good question. If someone says, I have a bucket list and I can only run 2 marathons, I would say New York and Boston.
Okay.
And they're different. I've described Boston as a 26.2 mile long Norman Rockwell painting that just literally you run through, Natick and Wellesley and like the town square in Natick. Literally this year we're running through, and there's kids on trampolines jumping up and bouncing up on the side of the road, and their families are out there, and people got flags and they're barbecuing, and it's very Americana. And you just, and of course the girls at Wellesley aren't bad either. You go by them and they cheer. New York is a different experience. Big city. You come off that Midtown Bridge, and then you start coming up First Avenue. And oh my God, the wall of noise and people are hanging out of balconies, and you feel like the astronauts in the ticker tape parade, which I warn people who haven't run New York before. I said, be careful, because you'll start to get the adrenaline excitement. It's like, oh my God, people are cheering for me. This is amazing. And you pick up your pace, and all of a sudden you realize it's only mile 16. No, too soon. But New York's pretty cool, Central Park and stuff. So those are my two favorite. If bucket list, I say if you can only run two races, I'd say those two. They're both hard to get into.
Yeah.
That's probably not an accident. But those would be my top two.
Okay. All right. And just down to the last couple of questions here. Let's think about some of the races you've witnessed. You mentioned one race that you watched on the Olympics in Rio, I believe, in 2016. So that kind of prompted me. This question just kind of popped up. What's the most memorable race you remember watching in the Summer Olympics? We'll say 800 meters and up.
Well, the one that I vaguely remembered as a kid, but I've since gone back and watched, is Dave Waddle winning the 800 meters at the 72 Olympics in Munich.
Right. That's the first one that I saw. That's the first Olympics I saw. And I that was amazing. So yeah, go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
So Dave Waddle was notable because he wore a golf cap when he ran. And so he had this sort of air of eccentricity that, appealed to runners, because runners, let's face it, runners are not mainstream football players and all that kind of stuff. So the guy was a little quirky, which appealed to distance runners. But if you watch that race, he was so far behind, and he just this amazing kick, and he just crushed, just passes this entire field at the Olympics, and your jaw has to drop and say, "Oh my God, did he just do that?" So yeah, that's probably one of the most classic Olympic events, and for a track event, yeah, that's one that stands out.
Yeah, and I remember that distinctly. I mean, and I've actually gone back and watched it once or twice too, but I'll never forget. I think Jim McKay had the call on that race, and he was just so ecstatic. And I just remember Waddle having to chase down two Kenyans and a Russian to win. And the Russian actually fell across the finish line trying to edge him out, but he didn't do it. So that was, given the times, back in 72, that made it even sweeter. So, but it's funny how we were thinking about the same one on that one. All right. And
well, I will say, I was going to say one other inspiration. If you remember the Olympics back then, there was a guy from Cuba, Alberto Juantorena, yeah. I used to sometimes pretend I was him on the track doing workouts.
Is that right?
He was just so strong that these are those kind of guys. The Walter Mitty thing is like, you're doing a workout, and who am I like? Alberto Juantorena. He was just impressive. So.
And he was interesting because didn't he win the 4 and the 800 in one Olympics? I don't know. It was kind of weird.
I think so, yeah.
Because you see a lot of these sprinters, they'll win the 100 and 200, or you might even see guys like, back in the day, Michael Johnson win the 2 and the 400, but he won the 4 and the 8, which is a little bit unusual.
Yes, that's hard. That's hard.
Okay, so last thing, Ed, I'm going to ask you the funniest thing you've ever experienced in any race since graduating, if you could share that story with us.
I didn't think about this one. Well, okay. Going back to the Boston experience, I had one guy, we were about halfway through, this was a few years ago, so, I'm getting older, and some guy's running past me, and we're like at the halfway point, and, we're all looking at our splits, and the guy runs up next to me, and he says, "I can't read my watch without my reading glasses. Can you tell me what my splits are?" And I looked at him, I said, "I don't have my reading glasses on either, so I can't help you."
That's pretty good.
That's when you're in the Grandmaster category. Is when your competitors can't read your own watch.
Oh, that is too funny. All right. Hey, listen, Ed, that's going to take us to the end of our conversation. Listen, I had a great time talking with you. Thanks for sharing your perspective on Navy track and just running in general. It's really been a lot of fun, so I appreciate being here with us today.
Oh, hey, Carl, man, any chance to get an excuse to catch up with you is a wonderful thing. So thank you for inviting me.
All right. Awesome. You take care, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
All right. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be back to wrap things up with our question of the day. This is Carl Darden, and you're listening to Navy Sports Central. All right, we are in the home stretch now, and it is time for our question of the day. Let's go ahead and review the one from our last episode to see how you guys responded. So here's the question. In 2021, the Mids finished 9th in the country with an average of 225.5 rushing yards per game. How many rushing yards do you think they will average this upcoming season? And our choices were 225 to 250 yards. That was followed by 250 to 275, then 275 to 300, and then finally over 300 yards. For this one, the top vote getter was 225 to 250 yards. There were 18 of you who went with that choice. Next was 250 to 275 yards with 9 votes. And then there were 4 of you who thought the Mids would gain somewhere between 275 and 300 yards. And apparently you guys felt like the team was still at least a year away from getting back to averaging over 300 yards a game because there were no votes for that choice. And that's kind of understandable, I would think, considering what's been going on the last couple of years. And I also think sticking with 225 to 250 yards does make sense, considering the history of the last 2 seasons. And that's also due to the fact that the fullback position is still a little bit of a question mark, and we know that establishing the dive play is a key to everything else. So once we get a clearer picture of what those fullbacks are looking like, then I think we'll have a better idea of what Navy will do on the ground. But the one thing I will say is that the optimist in me is saying that the Mids will still figure out a way to rush for somewhere between 275 and 300 yards a game. I don't have a ton of evidence to support that claim other than the fact that Ty Levitai's decision-making was really good in those last couple of games, and I think that's going to carry over. And also, the group of fullbacks and slotbacks we have, though a little bit untested, should really be exciting to watch based on what the coaching staff has been saying. So we'll see what happens, but I think they can definitely get to that number. Now let's get to the question of the day for this episode, and this is one for all the recreational and competitive runners in the group. This is just based on a conversation that Ed and I had on racing venues. So what I'm going to ask you guys is, what's been your most favorite venue where you've run either a 10K, a half marathon, or a marathon? And here are your choices. Boston, for any of you guys who've qualified for that one. New York, and I think that's also a qualifying race. Chicago, and then Washington, D.C. And I know that's for basically the Marine Corps Marathon and the 10K. The marathon, I believe, did start using a lottery system a few years ago, but the 10K is pretty much just open. So let me know what your answers are on that. I'll get the question up on the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page as soon as I can. And I'll also give you the option of adding a location as well in case you have never had a chance to run in any of those. All right, so that'll do it for this week's question. Okay, I do have 2 quick follow-up items for you guys before we finish up. The first is the amount of time it took the class of 2025 to climb Herndon. That turned out to be 3 hours, 36 minutes, and 58 seconds. So a little bit on the long side, but congratulations to the class of 25 for getting that done. And the second item was we never got an answer out of Ed when I asked him for his best Boston Marathon time. I think his modesty got the best of him there, but I went ahead and looked it up, and he actually ran it just this past fall, back in October 2021, because they had pushed off the Boston Marathon from 2020 on account of the pandemic. But Ed's time in October of 2021 was 2 hours, 57 minutes, 24 seconds. So just a stellar time, which was 14th in his age group. Great job, Ed. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to spread the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank my guest and classmate Ed Wilson for sharing his perspective on the Navy track team, racing strategy, and coaching philosophy. And it was also fun hearing the stories he had for us as well. We have been getting a great response to our question of the day, so if you want to jump in on that, just go to the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. I will go ahead and pin it to the top so you won't miss it. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use music from thousands of artists around the world, and those we feature in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.